The next item of business is a statement by Shona Robertson on Scottish Budget 2025 to 2026. The Cabinet Secretary will take questions at the end of her statement, and so there should be no interventions or interruptions. And I call on the Cabinet Secretary up to 30 minutes, please.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I am very proud to present a budget that delivers on the priorities of the people of Scotland. Over recent years, our nation has faced an unprecedented range of challenges. COVID, inflation, austerity and Brexit. Today, we can show that we understand the pressures that people are facing. We can choose to come together to bring hope to people, to renew our public services and deliver a wealth of new opportunities in our economy. This budget invests in public services, lifts children out of poverty, acts in the face of the climate emergency and supports jobs and economic growth. It is a budget filled with hope for Scotland's future. Presiding Officer, the UK budget resulted in an increase in funding through the Barnett formula. That's welcome, but let's be clear. After inflation, it represents growth in resource spending. That's day-to-day spending to pay for services of only around 1% year-on-year. Substantial financial pressures, therefore, persist. In the face of a Tory cost of living crisis, I am proud of the pay deals that give Scotland's nurses, teachers and public sector workers higher salaries than in the rest of the UK. And I am proud of the increased social security spending that keeps people out of poverty. In one way, the UK Government has actually added to the pressures that Scotland faces with the increase in employers' national insurance contributions. This hike will add well over £700 million to the cost of delivering public services. Despite this, the UK Government seems to be saying they will only reimburse less than half of that cost. They have accepted they should pay, but they plan to shortchange our public services by hundreds of millions of pounds. Even now, though, the Chancellor has an opportunity to do the right thing. Services in Scotland should not have to suffer. The Chancellor should pay the full price for her own decisions.
Thank you.
Presiding Officer, this Government has had to take difficult decisions to manage financial pressures. As set out in my statement in September, this included using some or all of the Scotland revenues. No one wanted to do this. This money was meant to be used for long-term investment to help transform our economy. So I was very clear that I didn't want us to use that cash to fund day-to-day spending. And we haven't. Members will be pleased to hear that Scotland has not been used up in this financial year. Instead, I'm able to deploy over £300 million of Scotland revenues in 2025-26 for exactly the kind of long-term investment it should be spent on.
Thank you.
This £300 million will deliver substantial investment in jobs and in measures to meet the climate challenge. Presiding Officer, all of it an investment in the long-term success of our nation. Progress for Scotland, that is our promise. But we can only deliver progress for the people of Scotland if there is a willingness to work together across this Parliament. Over 100 proposals have come from members across this chamber, and I'd like to thank the opposition for their constructive engagement. Others have emerged from the conversations that I and other ministers have had with people, businesses and organisations and communities the length and breadth of our land. And we've listened, we've heard people and we are acting. This is a budget for Scotland, by Scotland, and that's why I would encourage all members to give it their support. Presiding Officer, eradicating child poverty is our top priority. Policies such as the game-changing Scottish Child Payment and expanded funding for early learning and childcare, action in the face of need, but we want to go further. This budget will invest almost £800 million more in social security benefits in 2025-26, putting money directly into people's pockets and ensuring benefits rise by inflation. We recognise also that having a warm, safe, affordable place to live is critical to tackling child poverty. Far too many families are still in temporary accommodation. Shirley Ann Somerville has told me about the conversations that she's had with mums who feel the pain of bringing up their kids in inadequate accommodation. And that's why we're going to ramp up action on housing, investing £768 million in affordable homes. That enables over 8,000 new properties for social rent, mid-market rent and low-cost home ownership to be built or acquired this coming year. And it returns spending to a higher level than it was 2 years ago. And given the scale of the housing challenge, I'll look at all the levers available for me to deliver. And that's why I can confirm today that we'll be working with Edinburgh City Council to unlock over 800 new net zero homes at their Granton development site. Housing is, of course, just one strand of our work in tackling poverty. In education, we'll provide £120 million to head teachers to support initiatives designed to address the poverty-related attainment gap. And we'll also work with COSLA to expand free school meals to primary 6 and 7 children from low-income families, but we are determined to go further still. I can announce today that we'll fund a new initiative that will deliver more breakfast clubs in primary schools across Scotland. To be called Bright Start Breakfast, this will make things that little bit easier for working mums and dads, while also giving more of our kids a better start to their day. We'll help some of the most vulnerable in our society with new funding of £4 million for homelessness and prevention pilots. And following engagement with disabled people's organisations, we're delivering over £2.5 million to support actions within the Disability Equality Action Plan. All of these steps will help people. But I say this to the Chamber. If we want progress on housing, on learning, on free school meals, on breakfast clubs, this Parliament has got to vote for it. Now, Presiding Officer, we know how important public services are to the quality of life and the success of our nation, and none more so than our health service. My biggest financial commitment today is therefore to our NHS. Today's budget provides a record £21 billion for health and social care, an increase of £2 billion for frontline NHS boards, a record uplift. That's money that will make it easier for people to access GP appointments. It will improve A&E and will ensure more Scots get the care they need in good time. There is no public service that's more important, and there is no budget that has delivered a bigger vote of confidence in the NHS than this budget.
Thank you, members.
Now, Presiding Officer, Neil Gray has spoken to me about the pressures across the health service, and we know that for many people their experience of the NHS is excellent, but for others their experience falls short of what we would expect. So I'm today investing almost £200 million in our plan to reduce waiting times and improve capacity, to reform the service and make it more efficient and remove blockages that keep some patients in hospital far too long. Because of today's record funding, our health service can reduce waiting times. By March 2026, no one will wait longer than 12 months for a new outpatient appointment, inpatient treatment or day case treatment. The extra funding we're providing will see over 150,000 extra patients treated as a result. Our record investment will also deliver additional support for GPs, targeted to address known pressures in relation to waiting times and prevention. It means we can deliver on our commitment to increase social care spending by 25% over this Parliament, a full 2 years earlier than planned. And will expand the hospital-at-home service with more than 600 extra beds. We will deliver an extra 20,000 cataract and other optometry procedures in the community, and it means over 6,000 additional hip replacements or similar procedures each year. This record increase in spending will fund more dental training places, new specialist long COVID nurses and clinics, and more community-based support for teenage mental health. Presiding Officer, it's not just the day-to-day resource spending that will increase, though. We're also increasing health capital spending. This means I can announce to the Chamber today that this budget will fund the replacement of the Eye Pavilion in Edinburgh, the Belford Hospital in Fort William and Monklands Hospital in Airdrie.
Members.
Every single
Cabinet Secretary, if I might just stop you there. I have previously just called for, well, there should be no interventions or interruptions, and that is really because we have a lot to get through this afternoon, and I'm keen that when we do move to questions, we'll be able to save that time for members. Cabinet Secretary.
Every single project a priority for the people of Scotland, and every project something members of this chamber have called for, delivered by this budget and by this SNP government. But I say again, if members want it, investment in GPs, dentistry, long COVID, young people's mental health, then of course they have to vote for it. Presiding Officer, many services from schools to social care are delivered in partnership with local government. Here I will set a second record funding settlement. In 25-26, the Scottish Government will increase local authority funding by more than £1 billion. It will take their total funding to over £15 billion, including £289 million to give real terms protection to the General Revenue Grant. This enables councils to deliver the services that people rely upon. It delivers the pay increases agreed for our teachers, social care workers, refuse collectors and more. Pay increases that only go ahead, I remind the Chamber, if Parliament backs this budget. And while it will be for councils to make their own decisions, with record funding, there is no reason for big increases in council tax next year. Presiding Officer, Scotland will only thrive as a nation if our youngest people are nurtured. I'm therefore increasing spending on education and skills by 3% over and above inflation, an uplift of £158 million. Our choices will see staff in early learning and childcare paid at least the real living wage from April. It will support the 1140 hours of early learning and childcare for 3- and 4-year-olds and eligible 2-year-olds. In a cost of living crisis, this is funding that frees parents to work and earn while giving kids the best start in life. In our schools, I've heard from Jenny Gilruth the challenge that many children face with ASN, additional support needs. I'll therefore fund a £29 million ASN plan, delivering measures like training so that more of our teachers can become ASN teachers. And more widely, the budget can maintain teacher numbers at 2023 levels and continue improvements in our school estate with new projects from Shetland and Orkney to the Scottish borders. Presiding Officer, we will invest almost £4.2 billion across the justice system in 2025-26. This will maintain police numbers and continue policies that have seen levels of crime fall by 40% since we came to office. And I know from speaking to Angela Constance that a particular area of concern to retailers at the moment is shoplifting. So once again, we have listened and we are acting, and that's why I'm making an additional £3 million available to help tackle retail crime. And on prisons, we will fund replacements for HMP Inverness and Barlinnie through the £355 million capital budget. Presiding Officer, as I've set out, investment in public services is a priority, but reform goes hand in hand with that. I'm therefore establishing a £30 million fund to invest to save. It will fund the costs of reform, drive out efficiencies, improve productivity and ensure longer-term sustainability. I'm also intent on putting pay on a sustainable footing. Our public sector pay policy, published today, sets out a fair but flexible approach. It will deliver an above-inflation increase of 9% over the next 3 years, and it will do so flexibly, with management and unions free to agree how that increase is structured. That delivers progress on pay restoration and fairness to public servants and taxpayers alike. Presiding Officer, Scotland's biggest contribution to tackling the global climate challenge is, of course, our vast renewable energy resources, our innovation and our expertise. Simply put, we can help the planet while creating new jobs and opportunities here at home, and I saw a great example at Logan Energy this morning. We will create opportunities for businesses and jobs for communities by allocating £25 million to support the creation of new jobs in the green energy supply chain here in Scotland. And to help people at home and work, £300 million will be invested in upgrading heating and insulation. This money serves two hugely important purposes. It helps us to reduce our carbon emissions while tackling fuel poverty. Lower emissions and lower energy bills, that's an investment worth making. And just as we're investing in tackling the climate crisis, we must also tackle the nature crisis. So we'll invest almost £90 million to protect, maintain and increase our woodlands and peatlands. We'll make it easier for people to walk, wheel or cycle, and invest in resilient, efficient bus services with almost £190 million of funding. And we'll expand our electric vehicle charging network. I'm happy to tell the Chamber today that we will not simply match the calls for £4.7 billion invested in tackling the climate and nature emergencies. We will exceed it with an investment totalling £4.9 billion. Eradicating child poverty is this government's most important priority. And we'll do that by growing the wealth of our nation and sharing that wealth more equally. A thriving economy is not an afterthought, it is an essential requirement. So when discussing budget priorities with Kate Forbes, she told me about the discussions that she's had with investors and with employers big and small. And we've heard their ambition and we share it. Today I am able to announce that we'll invest £321 million in Scotland's enterprise agencies, supporting emerging tech, including AI and robotics, and programmes like our ambitious Tech Scaler initiative. And we know that colleges, universities and the wider skills system make absolutely crucial contributions to economic growth, which is why in this coming year we'll invest over £2 billion supporting them. We've listened to universities and are conscious that they must remain financially competitive with institutions in the rest of the UK. The Labour UK government rather shamefully increased student fees to pay for a 3.08% increase in university funding in England. Here, not only will we keep tuition free, but we'll increase total investment in higher education by 3.5%. Now, critical to economic growth is capital spending and investment in infrastructure. So I can tell the Chamber today that capital spend will total over £7 billion in this budget. A green reindustrialisation of Scotland is our ambition. So after discussion with Gillian Martin, I can announce that we will use that capital funding to make a significant strategic decision to invest in this nation's green future. So I can announce today that we will almost triple our investment in offshore wind to £150 million next year. This money will help leverage private investment of £1.5 billion in the infrastructure and manufacturing facilities critical to growing the sector. Capital funding of £150 million will accelerate our investment to support the offshore wind sector, underlining our commitment to invest up to £500 million over 5 years. Aberdeen is perfectly placed to become a global hub for green energy, and to support this, we'll establish a Scottish Government hub for offshore wind in the North East to provide an additional route for industry to engage with our teams. More broadly, we'll provide £100 million for digital connectivity, accelerating access to full fibre broadband. And we'll provide almost £1.1 billion to maintain and renew our rail infrastructure. £237 million will be invested to maintain and improve our ports and deliver a more resilient and effective ferry fleet. New rail rolling stock, new ferries and the electrification of the East Kilbride line, investment to keep Scotland moving. And to ensure our trunk road network is safe, Presiding Officer, resilient and efficient, we will invest £1 billion, including money to continue the dualling of the A9, something that is a central priority for Fiona Hislop and for all of us on these benches. Our capital programme allows us, of course, to tackle another issue that we've heard raised with us. I know that many people want to see their local high street thrive, So today I can announce that I will expand regeneration funding to £62 million, investing in towns and communities like Dundee, Arbroath, Postle Park, Pilton, Drumnadrochit and Stranraer Town Centre. But our rural communities are also important, and over £660 million will support the crucial contribution of Scotland's farmers, crofters and the wider rural economy. Mary Goujon has told me about the discussions that she's had with the farming community and their concerns about recent decisions by the UK Government. As asked for by farmers, we're returning in full the savings that were used in previous Scottish budgets through a new capital transformation scheme, with £20 million in 2025-26 and the remainder in 26-27. This budget also increases the dedicated funding available to the 4 councils operating their own ferry services to £50.3 million. Alongside this is £20 million of capital funding for Orkney Islands Council and Shetland Islands Council. This one-off investment will enable them to sustain and improve inter-island connections, whether that means flights, ferries or, and I know members for the Northern Isles will be pleased to hear this, tunnels between islands. It will be for those communities to decide. Presiding Officer, this budget will support businesses and communities through the non-domestic rates system. We've listened to concerns in business, particularly hospitality, about significant financial pressures as a result of staff shortages, high energy prices and Labour's national insurance hike. And I can confirm today that we will help. The Small Business Bonus Scheme, the most generous small business rates relief in the UK, will be protected. In addition, the budget will provide for 40% non-domestic rates relief in 2025-26 for the 92% of hospitality premises liable for the basic property rate, capped at £110,000 per business. In our islands, that relief will be 100%. And outside of hospitality, I will also help by freezing the basic property rate at 49.8p, the lowest such rate in the UK for the 7th year in a row. So thanks to this budget, over 95% of non-domestic properties will pay lower property tax than anywhere else in the UK, with over £100,000 taken out of rates altogether.
Thank you.
Presiding Officer, the latest Scottish Fiscal Commission forecasts show that Scottish taxes will raise £24.6 billion in 2025-26. That is £777 million more than had been forecast in December 2023, due mainly to an increase in forecast income tax revenue. I'm sure members will be pleased to hear the good news that this increase is in part due to average earnings growing faster than in the rest of the UK. Overall, the tax decisions that we have taken have delivered £1.7 billion more in 2025-26 than if we had followed UK policies. So let me say a thank you to those with the broadest shoulders who are paying a little bit more, because they are enabling Scotland to spend more on the things that matter most, protecting and improving our NHS, growing the economy and lifting children out of poverty. The new UK Government has increased employers' national insurance contributions, a policy that the OBR has told this Parliament will fall mainly on employees' wages. It's estimated that this will take over £2 billion out of the Scottish economy next year. So in the light of that, I can confirm today that this Government will not introduce any new bans or increase the rates of Scottish income tax for the remainder of this Parliament. But, Presiding Officer, I want to go further, because Labour have hit the pay packets of working people in Scotland and have decided to provide tax support for low and medium income earners. So while the UK Government has frozen all income tax thresholds, in Scotland the basic and intermediate rate thresholds will increase this year by 3.5%, effectively twice the rate of inflation. That means more.
Thank you. Thank you.
That means more of people's money will be taxed at the starter and basic tax rates. This also means that the majority of taxpayers in Scotland will continue to pay less income tax than in the rest of the UK. And I can commit today that this will remain true until at least the end of this Parliament, while, as with the UK, thresholds for higher, advanced and top rates will be maintained at their current levels. Taking our tax and social security choices together, including on pension age winter fuel payments, 60% of Scots will be better off because they live in Scotland. That is what delivering for the people of Scotland looks like. Finally, on tax, the additional dwelling supplement rate will next year will increase from 6 to 8% with effect from tomorrow, unless legal missives have been signed on or before today, and will match England by legislating to increase the standard rate of the Scottish landfill tax to £126.15 per tonne and the lower rate of £4.05 per tonne from the 1st of April 2025. Presiding Officer, we've listened to people in communities across our land. We've heard them and we've acted. And we've heard in particular the concerns of the culture sector. They rightly are flagging the threat the Tory cost of living crisis, inflation and Labour's national insurance hike pose to their future. But this SNP government will help. Earlier this week, Labour called on me to deliver a £25 million increase in the culture budget and to exempt music venues from non-domestic rates. I can announce today that, yes, we will provide NDR support to music venues, but I will not increase the culture budget by £25 million. No, Presiding Officer, instead, I will increase the culture budget by £34 million next year, another record increase.
Thank you, members.
And we're committed to increase arts and culture funding by £100 million. After just 2 years, we're halfway there. Next year, subject to the normal budget processes, I aim to deliver a further £20 million increase. Taken with this year's rise, multi-year funding can be provided to cultural organisations across Scotland, something Angus Robertson has told me will be transformational for the sector. And that includes our world-class Scottish festivals, whose budget we are doubling, and thousands of grassroots artists who will also benefit from this support. I have one final announcement to make in this budget. Our first priority is tackling child poverty. The two-child cap is a pernicious part of the UK welfare system. Introduced by the Tories, it has caused misery for children and families in Scotland. Many expected an incoming Labour government to abolish the cap. We've waited, but Labour haven't delivered. This SNP government will. Just as with pension age winter heating payments, we will act. Presiding Officer, we will mitigate the two-child cap. The detailed work of building the system will start with this budget, but implementation requires the cooperation of the UK Government. They control the Department for Work and Pensions, which means they control the data. We don't. But we have a year, and we'll work as hard as possible in 2025 so we can start paying families as early as we can in 2026. That is more than reasonable. But be in no doubt the cap will be scrapped. My challenge to Labour is to work with us, join us in ending the cap in Scotland, give us the information that we need. But either way, let me be crystal clear. This government is ending the two-child cap, and in doing so will lift over 15,000 Scottish children out of poverty.
Thank you. Thank you.
Presiding Officer, let me summarise the measures this SNP government sets out today. Record NHS investment, money to reduce waiting lists and make it easier for people to see their GP. Tax choices that put money in the pockets of low and middle income earners and help out hard-pressed local pubs and restaurants. Winter heating payments for older Scots. More affordable homes. Investment in childcare and nursery education in more jobs and business growth. More breakfast clubs in our schools, £4.9 billion of positive climate action, a record increase in funding for local services, transformational increases in culture spending, and, presiding officer, an end to the two-child cap, lifting 15,000 children out of poverty. This is what the people of Scotland want and will vote for. The question is whether opposition parties will too. Presiding officer, this is a budget that delivers progress for Scotland. It's a budget that delivers hope for Scotland, and I urge Parliament to support it.
Thank you. Thank you. The Cabinet Secretary will now take questions on the issues raised in her statement. I intend to allow around 60 minutes or so for questions, after which we'll move on to the next item of business. I'd be grateful if members who wish to put a question were to press their request to speak buttons. And I call Craig Hoy.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Today's budget was a chance for the SNP to set a new direction on tax and spending. An opportunity for John Swinney to undo some of the damage he has done to Scotland over the last 17 years. But this budget is just more of the same. Inputs, not outputs, half-hearted attempts to fix the problems that they themselves have created. The era of high tax, free spending is far from over, and once again, people in Scotland will pay more and get less. Thanks to the SNP, workers and businesses...
Let us hear Mr Hoy.
Workers and business will pay more in tax, only for that money to be wasted by SNP ministers who let public services decline. And what a boast it was today. A new policy, a boast to say 12 months wait for an inpatient or outpatient appointment in our NHS. That is a scandal, and John Swinney's fingerprints are all over it. Deputy Presiding Officer, the SNP's economic mismanagement has held Scotland back. And isn't it the reality that the only real growth that we are seeing in the economy is the size of the SNP government and the scale of the black hole that is the heart of their finances? And the reality is that we are paying a heavy price for years of SNP waste on ferries, on gender reforms, failed independence bids and a national care service that has already cost the nation £30 million. The benefits bill, rising by a further £800 million, is out of control because the government can't get people back into work. NHS waiting lists are so long that sick people are staying sick. Now, the budget confirms that the SNP has wrecked public services. John Swinney is out of ideas and his government is running out of time. The NHS is on its knees and needs urgent reform. Now, we welcome today's budget increase for healthcare, but our NHS needs more than money. It needs leadership and a serious plan from this government. And now we've set out proposals to reduce bureaucracy so that more can be invested into accelerating treatment at the front line. So ask Shona Robertson this: will the SNP make these necessary changes, or is their only solution more money, which hasn't reduced waiting lists one bit to date? And wasn't the Auditor-General of Scotland right when he said this government has no vision for the NHS? A government which now has record levels of revenue and record levels of tax receipts, but no vision for Scotland, no vision for our NHS, no vision for economic growth. In fact, a £33 million cut to the enterprise budget today. Now, after years of failing to hand over rates relief to Scotland's struggling businesses, I'm pleased that the SNP, in part, has met our demand for rates relief for hospitality. But why so long? How many pubs and restaurants have gone to the wall in the interim? And why has retail been left out of this announcement today? Today, also, hard-pressed householders will face more pain in the form of council tax rises as the government sweeps away the council tax cap in order to make up for the SNP's decade and more of underfunding Scotland's councils. Presiding Officer, income taxes are still the highest in the UK. So why hasn't the government listened to those who warn that Scotland's high tax regime and high tax rates are hitting growth? Why didn't the government, rather than just tinkering with thresholds, take up the option of reversing its damaging tax increases? And why didn't the Minister come to this chamber and admit what everyone else in Scotland can see, that the SNP's experiment of hitting Scotland with higher taxes has monumentally failed?
Cabinet Secretary.
So let me welcome, I think, the welcome for the record investment in the NHS. And of course, it is not just about the investment, but where that money is then spent. And as I said in my statement, reform, efficiency and productivity are at the heart of that investment. And the Minister for Public Finance, I can assure you, is driving that across this government. But let me correct Craig Hoy on a number of points. More than half of Scottish taxpayers will pay less under the proposals from this government. And of course, Craig Hoy talked about sustainability and the benefits bill out of control. I think what's out of control is his leader's letter calling for £1 billion of tax cuts. Imagine the impact of that on fiscal sustainability. Less money for our investment in our public services, less money for the NHS, less money for local government, less money for other services as well. And when it comes to retail premises, I have set out an affordable proposition for hospitality businesses, which will mean about 11,000 hospitality businesses benefiting from that. What I would say to Craig Hoy is to have gone further, first of all, would not be sustainable. His proposition, I think, was going to cost over £350 million. That's money that we will not get from the UK government. We only got £145 million this year in consequentials. There will be no consequentials next year because the UK government is moving to a different business tax rate system that cannot be replicated here. So this government is taking the sensible, sustainable decisions, whether it's on business rates or whether it's on taxation or whether it's on the investment in public services. And as for council tax rises, this is a record level of investment for local government. I'm sure that's something that local government will welcome.
Thank you. I call Michael Mara.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. This budget benefits from an additional £5.2 billion from the UK Labour government. In July, the people of Scotland turned the page so that Labour could end austerity and take the tough decisions to deliver urgently needed investment in our public services. And this means that today we had the opportunity to take a new direction in Scotland. And not just a question of how we spend £5 billion, but how we spend an unprecedented £60 billion budget. It's an opportunity to deal with the country's challenges, to deliver better outcomes rather than trumpeting a shopping list of inputs. If only they had the imagination to take that new direction. Instead, in recent days, we have been invited by the SNP to stretch our imaginations, to suspend disbelief and accept that this is John Swinney's first budget. The First Minister is supposedly now the fresh-faced ingenue of Scottish politics, a break from the past that he would like the country to forget. In reality, John Swinney has personally delivered 11 SNP budgets from that very spot. And for all of that time, they have hidden behind grievance and blaming a dreadful Tory government. But today must be, Presiding Officer, finally the day when the excuses end. Because today's budget lands in the midst of a rapidly escalating crisis in our NHS. From Aberdeen to Glasgow and everywhere in between. The frost has barely bitten, but the predictable, indeed predicted, crisis is unfolding. The Auditor-General has set out in the starkest terms possible that it is the failure of this government. He is repeating his warnings of 12 months ago with added feeling, and that feeling is that he is banging his head against a brick wall. It is abundantly clear that nothing of any effect has been done. No reform, no vision, no plan. Scotland is going in the wrong direction under the SNP. 1 in 6 Scots on an NHS waiting list. Schools falling further behind. A national housing emergency. Growth lagging behind the rest of the UK. Every Scottish institution weaker. So does the Cabinet Secretary agree? It's not enough just to try and correct the mistakes made last year by putting back the money that was slashed in the budget or in the cuts chaos of the now annual SNP emergency budget in the middle of the year. And can she finally accept that her statement amounts to quite literally more of the same, sending Scotland ever faster in the wrong direction?
Cabinet Secretary.
I think I must have missed the welcome for the record funding for the NHS, the record funding for local government and the funding for affordable housing. And of course, Michael Mara started with talking about the funding from the UK Government, and there is indeed an uplift of funding. That's very welcome, but it's very theoretical unless that money gets to frontline services. And the only way it gets to frontline services is if people vote for this
Cabinet
budget.
Cabinet Secretary, there's huge interest in questions this afternoon. Now, if I have to keep interrupting so we can hear one another, members will have to understand there will be a consequence. We'll be able to take fewer members. Cabinet Secretary.
Now, Michael Mara mentioned something along the lines of the frost biting. Well, let me ask Michael Mara this. Surely Labour are not going to vote against winter fuel payments for our pensioners for a third time in a row. Surely not, because that really would lack a lot of credibility. And surely Labour are not going to vote against the measures we are taking to mitigate the two-child cap. So I hope in all of the froth from Michael Mara, that Michael Mara and his colleagues will recognise that this is a budget that puts money into our frontline services and lifts kids out of poverty and gives our pensioners the winter fuel support they need. I can't imagine a scenario where Scottish Labour is going to vote against that.
Paul Rossgreer.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. £4.9 billion for climate and nature sounds positive. I'll read with interest what it contains. It cannot be padded out with greenwashing. I'm glad to see free bus travel for asylum seekers and free ferry travel for young islanders included. These were both commitments secured by the Greens when we were in government, but cut by the SNP this year, so I'm glad those cuts have been undone. I'm also glad the government's agreed to the Green proposal to increase tax on the purchase of second-hand holiday homes, but despite the Cabinet Secretary's claims, this budget contains a huge cut to core council services like schools and social care. It fails to expand free school meals to primary 6 and 7. It cuts the Nature Restoration Fund and the Cycling, Walking and Safe Routes funding, and efforts to make homes warmer and greener fall short by £250 million. I will not dismiss the positive steps taken, but does the Scottish Government accept that if they want Green support, significant further changes will be required? This budget will need to do much more for people and planet.
Cabinet Secretary.
I don't accept that, and I would ask Ross Greer to look very carefully. So, for example, at table 4.12 around the local government settlement, because the budget compares to the ABR position, something that this Parliament wanted through the committee process, through FPAC, it means, of course, that there needs to then be a recognition of the in-year transfers that happen, particularly from health and education. All of that is set out at table 4.12 that shows the £1 billion of extra investment in local government. So I would urge Ross Greer to look at that. But let me welcome the welcome that he has made for the very substantial investment, the £4.9 billion investment in positive climate action. I'm sure that is something that Green colleagues will welcome, and I'm happy to continue to discuss with him and others the content of this budget.
Thank you. I call Alex Cole-Hamilton.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. Presiding Officer, after 17 years, this country is badly off course. And if we're honest, we know that the only thing will truly bring about the change that Scotland needs is a change of government. In the meantime, Liberal Democrats will work hard to unpick some of the damage that has been done. So it is right that the government have listened to us and included spending on social care, affordable homes, insulation, winter fuel payments for pensioners, on additional support needs, on ferries and tunnels, GPs, dentists, long COVID, mental health, on Edinburgh's Eye Pavilion, the Belford Hospital, and business rate relief for hospitality. All of these were Liberal Democrat demands, and they are in the budget. But let me be clear, Presiding Officer, this does not guarantee our support. As in all budgets, the devil will be in the detail, and we'll be looking closely at that. Presiding Officer, in years previous, the SNP have done this dance many times. They say they have spent all the money at the start of the process, only to find huge amounts of cash down the back of the sofa as we move forward. So Will the Cabinet Secretary dispense with that charade, be clear with Parliament now and tell us how much she has kept in reserve and what she is willing to do with it?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, look, first of all, let me welcome Alex Cole-Hamilton's welcome of a number of the content of this budget, which I started this budget statement by talking about the engagement we've had across this Parliament. And I think I've managed to speak to most of the things, or many of the things, that have been raised by members across these benches, and with perhaps the exception of the Tories, who came with a £1 billion tax cut list. But most other members and parties have been very constructive in this process. And given we're a minority government, that's how we need to proceed. So let me say about the very keen to continue to have engagement across this Parliament. In terms of his final comment about unallocated resources, really the only unallocated resources will be in the Scotland territory. But of course, we wouldn't want to invest all of the Scotland money, I wouldn't have assumed, in one financial year. This is funding that can be invested over a number of financial years, and that's something that we are keen to talk to members about. So let's keep talking. At the end of the day, we need support across this Parliament. I think what I have put on the table today should garner that support.
Thank you. I call Michelle Thompson to be followed by Murdo Fraser.
Thank you, Cabinet Secretary, for that statement and for the SNP Government's continued support of Scots. A number of mitigations were already in place to alleviate Tory Westminster austerity, and today has seen the addition of further measures to alleviate UK Labour austerity. But I'm personally heartened to see the growth plans for housing, for enterprise agencies, for digital connectivity, for AI and robotics, for skills, for roads, for the Invest to Save fund, for capital spend, for offshore wind and supply chain, and most of all, the protection of ScotWind funds. But can the Cabinet Secretary briefly outline which area she believes will add most to ensure Scotland's economy prospers and that makes this Scottish budget a real budget for growth?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, can I thank Michelle Thompson for her question? I think there is a lot in this budget for growth. The investment in green energy, for a start, is very, very important. The investment in our enterprise agencies is also important, as is also the investment in our trade offices. I heard this morning about Scottish Development's international support for the energy company that I visited this morning, and that's been crucial in them securing investment on a global stage into Scotland, something that I see the Tories wanted to remove from the budget. Very strange when they're supposed to support economic growth to remove one of our key agencies from doing the good work that they do with companies like Logan Energy. I think that is inexplicable. I can also say to Michelle Thompson that she will be pleased to know that the budget also helps provide a positive future for Grangemouth, providing £7.7 million to support work to secure a long-term and sustainable future for the industrial cluster. And I'm happy to keep engaging with her on that point.
Murdo Fraser to be followed by Fulton McGregor.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The Cabinet Secretary in her statement talked about the need for a thriving economy. That's very welcome, because Scotland's low growth compared to the rest of the UK has cost our economy £11 billion since 2011. But this budget cuts the enterprise portfolio by a further £33 million on top of last year's cuts, delivering a cut over 2 years of £100 million, or 20% in the Deputy First Minister's portfolio. How does that help grow the economy?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, again, as I answered earlier, I would point Murdo Fraser to be cautious around that in terms of the comparison with the ABR figures. So what you have to do is to look at where some of that transfers. So there have been areas transferred out of the Deputy First Minister's portfolio into other areas. And I think we have to be absolutely clear about that. And I will write to Murdo Fraser with the detail of that. Plus, of course, the investment in the Scottish National Investment Bank is a hugely important investment. Murdo Fraser talked about the Scottish economy. And actually, the figures for the Scottish economy, and I laid out some of the tax revenue gain in my statement, which I think is very positive. We have productivity has grown by an average rate that is higher than the UK's. We've seen GDP per capita growing at a faster rate than the UK's since 2007. We've seen a record number of foreign direct investment projects put at risk by the Tory cuts to SDI, of course, that were secured in Scotland in 2023, maintaining Scotland's position as the top-performing area of the UK outside of London for the 9th year running. And of course, we have net in-migration to Scotland across all tax bands. That says to me that the Scottish economy is resilient and it's doing well, and we should just get behind it and support our businesses.
Thank you. I call Fulton McGregor to be followed by Jackie Bailey.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Cabinet Secretary, it will come as very welcome news to my constituents in Coatbridge and Chryson, as well as to those, of course, in Neil Gray's Airdrie and Shotts constituency, to hear that the increase in the NHS capital funding will allow for the new Monklands replacement project to go ahead. Can I ask what discussions the Cabinet Secretary has had with NHS Lanarkshire with regard to this announcement, and what are the Government's expectations now in terms of progression of the project, which is, of course, very urgent and very much needed for the people of Lanarkshire?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, NHS Lanarkshire will prepare the full business case for scrutiny by the Scottish Government's Capital Investment Group. That is a normal process, and then officials will liaise with the board regarding funding for that business case and design work. So all of that will now go forward at pace, and I know that it's something that the people of Lanarkshire will very much welcome this investment.
Jackie Bailey to be followed by Willie Coffey.
At the start of the SNP government, health spending per head of the population was 17% higher in Scotland than it was in England. Over the past 17 years, this difference has been eroded to less than 3%. That tells you all you need to know about the SNP's priorities. Less money given to the NHS over the entire time John Swinney was either the Finance Minister or the Deputy First Minister. The £2.5 billion for health from the Labour government is welcome and transformational, but this needs to be accompanied by reform and political leadership. So can I ask the Finance Secretary, does she understand why people don't trust the SNP to deliver reform, given that they have been in charge for 17 years and have completely failed NHS staff and patients?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, of course, the £2.5 billion funding for the NHS only gets to the NHS if you vote for this budget, Jackie Bailey. And as for the £21 billion record funding, of course, the thing that Jackie Bailey failed to mention was it includes social care funding. And social care funding is absolutely vital if we're going to tackle delayed discharge and look at the system as a whole system, including the NHS and social care. And that's why we've put record investment into social care, including, of course, making sure our social care workers get the pay that they deserve.
I call Willie Coffey to be followed by Liz Smith.
Thank you. Can the Cabinet Secretary advise how this SNP budget will provide increased support for local government and the delivery of vital public services under their responsibilities, including my own East Ayrshire Council?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, the local government settlement provides record funding of over £15 billion, including £289 million of general revenue grant for local priorities. Individual local authority allocations will be provisionally published in the Local Government Finance Consultation Circular on Thursday, the 12th of December. And of course, we'll invest £3.3 million in the Learning Estate Investment Programme and Scotland Schools for Future programme. In East Ayrshire, these programmes will support the Doon Valley Community Campus and St Sophia's Primary School and the Barony Campus, Gargaston Primary School, Hurlford Primary School, Muirkirk Primary School, Wattriggs Primary School and William McAvenny Campus.
Thank you. I call Liz Smith to be followed by Kenneth Gibson.
Thank you. The Scottish Fiscal Commission forecast told us that social security spending was predicted to increase from £6.283 billion in 24-25 to £6.861 billion in 25-26. That's an increase of £578 million, whereas the Cabinet Secretary is saying that the uplift is going to be £800 million. That is a huge difference, Cabinet Secretary. So where on earth is the money coming from to pay for that uplift?
Secretary.
Well, of course, we see investment in social security as an investment in people and in tackling poverty. I know that Liz Smith and our Tory colleagues don't share that aspiration. In fact, they wanted to cut social security in the letter set out by Russell Finlay. But of course, in terms of fiscal sustainability, the real risk to fiscal sustainability is £1 billion of tax cuts that removes funding out of health, out of local government, out of social security, out of all areas of public spending. And that's not just wrong in terms of fiscal sustainability, it's not morally sustainable either.
Call Kenneth Gibson to be followed by Daniel Johnson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. In a generally very positive and welcome statement, I am disappointed that while the ferry service capital allocation rises an impressive 50% from £158.9 million to £237.1 million, there is no information as yet for my Ardrossan and Arran constituents awaiting the long-promised Ardrossan Harbour redevelopment. This project is essential both to Arran's lifeline ferry service and the 165 Arran jobs directly reliant on the port. Can I ask the Cabinet Secretary if redevelopment is at the forefront of Scottish Government plans, and if so, when we might hear some good news as to progress?
Cabinet Secretary.
Can I first of all recognise Kenny Gibson's tenacity on this matter? He's campaigned for this for a long time, and can I assure him that the Scottish Government remains absolutely committed to ensuring the Arran ferry service is fit for the future and to find a solution at Ardrossan that can be delivered in a cost-effective way, reflecting the needs of all the partners involved. And Scottish ministers have been clear that it's vital the business case to support the harbour upgrade needs to be robust to give greater certainty on the project costs and financial packages required. We'll look to provide updates when notable progress is made, and I'll make sure that that's provided to Kenny Gibson in due course.
I call Daniel Johnson to be followed by Ben McPherson.
Allocation of skills funding is flat in this budget at £202 million. Not only does this represent a real terms cut of 2.4%, it means that spending will be some £50 million or more less than is raised by levy payers in Scotland. So when the government has £5 billion more to spend, does this not undermine attempts to grow jobs and wages? Does it not further undermine employers by spending less on skills than they are being required to pay?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, can I first of all just remind Daniel Johnson that I set out the increases in my statement around the colleges, universities and wider skills system. We'll invest over £2 billion in supporting them. The total investment in higher education will increase by 3.5%. It's not an issue I remember his colleagues raising at any of the meetings that we've had, but if they want to follow this up post this budget, this is a draft budget, we have to continue to discuss with parties across this chamber, then it's something I am more than happy to follow up with Daniel Johnson.
I call Ben McPherson to be followed by Tim Eagle.
Presiding Officer, as the local constituency MSP, I passionately believe in the significant potential for the development of Granton waterfront to help tackle Edinburgh's housing challenges, to transform the northern part of our capital city for the common good, and to deliver economic growth, new opportunities and multiple positive benefits for existing communities in the area and our country more broadly. That's why I have worked constructively to highlight all of this to ministers, and I am therefore delighted and grateful that the Finance Secretary has committed to working with City of Edinburgh Council to deliver 800 more affordable homes. Can the Cabinet Secretary say more about the Scottish Government's commitment to the development of Granton Waterfront as a strategic site and the positive impact this will deliver for the people of Northern Edinburgh and Scotland as a whole?
Cabinet Secretary.
Oh, Ben McPherson is absolutely right. This is a big deal for Edinburgh, and we'll work with Edinburgh over the coming months and hope to announce an early deal, a deal on the detail early in the 2025-26 financial year to support this multi-year project. And I talked in my statement about unlocking 800 new net zero homes of mixed types and tenures, but also sustainable transport links and placemaking initiatives. This could be a game changer for Edinburgh, and I'm very acutely aware of the housing need in Edinburgh. I think this will go a long way to helping as part of the solution.
Tim Eagle, to be followed by Emma Roddick.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Can I just remind you of my register of interest as an active farmer? Hundreds of farmers stood outside less than a week ago calling for fair funding. The SNP said they would listen. This budget falls significantly short of what NFUS saw as a baseline figure, and £46 million that was snatched in previous budgets won't be given back in full. This is a budget which seems to have fundamentally left our farmers and fishermen abandoned. Cabinet Secretary, isn't it the truth that this budget fails to deliver the money needed not just for farmers, but for the whole of rural Scotland?
Cabinet Secretary.
No, it's not true, and what we will deliver through the return of this funding is a transformation fund for agriculture and for food security. Many of these things are things that the farming community and their representatives have asked for. They wanted the money in capital, and they wanted it in a way that could be spent. That money would be difficult to spend in one financial year, which is why it will be spent over 2 financial years. But this is a guarantee to the farmers in rural Scotland that every penny of that funding will be returned. But of course, only if the budget passes. So if Tim Eagle wants money to go to farmers in rural Scotland, then I suggest he votes for this budget.
Before I call Emma Roddick, I would ask members to resist any temptation to contribute when they haven't been called to speak. Emma Roddick, to be followed by Mark Griffin.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. It's very welcome that the Scottish Government is continuing to make such substantial financial support available to tackle child poverty, including through the Scottish Child Payment, mitigating Labour's two-child cap and ramping up housing investment without additional funding from the UK Government to do so. While the recent autumn statement by the Chancellor was a missed opportunity for Labour to follow our lead in tackling child poverty, can the Deputy First Minister provide further detail as to how this budget helps progress this Government's priority of ending child poverty?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, I can confirm that this budget is focused on eradicating child poverty, and it is this Government's top priority, and that's why we're investing in a package of benefits and payments only available in Scotland, totalling £644 million in 2025-26, including the Scottish Child Payment, with 356,000 children now forecast to be eligible. Further investment includes expansion and testing of free breakfast clubs, free school meals provision for primary 6 and 7 children in receipt of the Scottish Child Payment, and continued support for the school clothing grant. And of course, what I have announced today in terms of the progress to scrapping the two-child cap will lift 15,000 children out of poverty, some of our most vulnerable children in our communities, and that's something I'm sure will be welcomed by many across Scotland.
Mark Griffin, to be followed by Kevin Stewart.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. In real terms, the housing budget was £925 million in 2022-23. It went down to £790 million in 23-24, down to £610 million in 24-25, but then up to £770 million for next year. Presiding Officer, that's like a dodgy Black Friday deal in reverse, where retailers inflate their prices to give the impression of a good deal on the day, but the cost of that is thousands more children in temporary accommodation. The Cabinet Secretary previously said that housing was the #1 priority for additional funding. How can the Government still claim that is the case in the face of over £150 million of cuts to the housing budget from 22-23?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, of course, if Mark Griffin had listened to the housing organisations, they were asking for the restoration of this funding, and that is what this budget delivers. It delivers the restoration of that funding, and of course that was in addition to the £80 million that was already announced in terms of the measures to tackle the very issue that Mark Griffin raised about temporary accommodation, because I agree with him. We absolutely need to drive down the number of families in temporary accommodation. This investment will help do it, but the investment only gets to housing and to the housing organisations if this budget passes, and therefore I hope Mark Griffin will support it.
Kevin Stewart, to be followed by Douglas Lumsden.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Monica Lennon described the two-child cap as the wrong position. Pam Duncan-Glancy said it was horrific. Anas Sarwar himself called it heinous. Does the Cabinet Secretary share my view that since the UK Government has refused to scrap this heinous policy, that Labour MSPs must back this budget if they are to have any credibility on tackling child poverty at all? And they must back this budget to lift over 15,000 kids out of poverty.
Cabinet Secretary on matters for which the Government is responsible.
Well, of course, Kevin Stewart is absolutely right. Actions speak louder than words. And it will be the actions of the Scottish Labour benches on whether or not they vote for this budget, which, among many other things, takes the steps to scrap the two-child cap. So either they're going to get themselves into the same awkward position that they got on winter fuel, or they can do the right thing by supporting a budget that does the right thing by some of our most vulnerable families. The public will be watching, Presiding Officer.
I call Douglas Lumsden, to be followed by Ash Regan.
Presiding Officer, this SNP budget is a damp squib for the North East. We still have no energy strategy and no just transition plan. The much-trumpeted £500
Let's hear Mr Lumsden.
The much-trumpeted £500 million just transition fund for the North East and Moray sees its annual allocation at a paltry £15.9 million next year, and it will take decades to stump up at this rate. And of course it comes after the shameful abandonment last year of the £80 million carbon capture fund. Surprise, surprise, no sign of it again this year. Thousands of jobs across the North East are being lost while this devolved government defers, dithers and delays. So when will the SNP government deliver a just transition, or will they admit it was another empty promise to the North East of Scotland?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, I've never heard anybody so raging at £150 million investment in green energy for the North East of Scotland. If that's Douglas Lumsden on a good day welcoming something, I wouldn't like to see him on a bad day. This is money that will be welcomed by businesses across the North East of Scotland. And do you know why Douglas Lumsden's so angry? He knows it too.
I call Ash Regan, to be followed by Bob Doris.
I'll start, Presiding Officer, by sounding a cautious note of consensus with the Government. I believe this budget is a step in the right direction. However, many Scottish households are under immense pressure, which is why in my budget dealings I've sought to protect both children and also pensioners via the winter fuel payments and extending free school meals. And I welcome the progress that the Government has made on those two issues. However, the Government promised in 2021 to provide free school meals for all primary school children. And this budget does not deliver on that commitment. Why not?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, first of all, can I welcome Ash Regan's welcome for the substantial contents of this budget in regard to winter fuel payments and the two-child cap. Well, we have decisions to make about where we think the investment can make the biggest impact on eradicating child poverty. And that's why this Government has concluded that the biggest impact is to lift 15,000 children, our most vulnerable children, out of poverty through the scrapping of the two-child cap. Now, our programme of investment in free school meals will continue, targeting those in primary 6 and 7 who are in receipt of the Scottish Child Payment, and we will go further in the future as resources are available. But faced with a choice of what makes the biggest impact for the most vulnerable, poorest children in our society. Eradicating the two-child cap wins every time, and that's what we will do.
Thank you. And I call Bob Doris to be followed by Pam Duncan-Glancy.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I recently met with Hospice UK, and it was sobering to hear that UK Labour's national insurance increases will rob Scotland's hospices of £2.5 million each and every year. Combined with challenges over core funding and in matching NHS pay awards, an under-pressure sector needs support. How can today's budget help Scotland's hospices?
Secretary.
Well, first of all, can I absolutely agree with Bob Doris about the importance of our hospice sector. And we'll provide £4 million for the hospice sector, and from 2025-26 we'll align the support that we provide for pay uplifts in the hospice sector to the outcomes of the NHS Agenda for Change negotiations. I know that's a really important matter for our hospice sector, and this will ensure that hospices will get the additional funding that's needed to see their healthcare staff match pay increases with NHS staff, and I hope that's something that Bob Doris and others will welcome.
Thank you. I call Pam Duncan-Clancy to be followed by Claire Haughey.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The budget today fails to deliver the change direction we need for our schools, colleges and universities. It continues on the Government's failed path, which has led to falling standards, overstretched staff and managed decline. And in some cases, it's not even more of the same for the Government, it's less. So can I ask the Cabinet Secretary, how on earth will less than £1 million each to local authorities on ASN and cuts to budgets in colleges and universities for student support possibly improve outcomes and spread opportunity for all of Scotland's children and young people?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, can I say to Pam Duncan-Glancy quite the opposite. There's more money in this budget for teachers, there's more money for additional support needs, and there's more money for local government, who at the end of the day are the deliverers of education, £1 billion more for local government. So we're providing the resources to local government so they can get on and provide the standard of education that parents and children across the country would expect.
Thank you. I call Claire Haughey to be followed by Megan Gallagher.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, and I refer members to my register of interests. I'm employed as a bank nurse by Greater Glasgow and Clyde NHS, and I welcome the record-high NHS funding announced by the Cabinet Secretary today. We know that treatment close to home is preferred by many people and preferable for many conditions. Can the Cabinet Secretary set out how the budget will enable more people to get the NHS care they need in or close to their own home?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, Claire Haughey, of course, is absolutely right. So over £2.2 billion for primary care will help to deliver the essential reform. It will improve capacity and patient access in local communities, and it will help to reduce the demand on acute services. The budget also supports the expansion of hospital at home, which has been a huge success, and primary care enhancements. And as I mentioned in my statement, the budget also includes nearly £200 million to reduce waiting times, help reduce delays in hospital discharge. It will help to support frailty units linked to every A&E department to support community re-enablement, and it will expand, as I said, the hospital at home programme to meet 20% of Scotland's NHS bed base by December 2026.
Called Rona Mackay to be followed by Patrick Harvey.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The safety and security of the public is one of the most important duties of any government. Whilst the manner in which money allocated is spent is an operational matter for Blue Light Services, can the Cabinet Secretary provide more detail regarding the funding allocations for Police Scotland and the Scottish Fire and Rescue Services?
Cabinet Secretary.
We will spend £1.62 billion on policing in 2025-26 and £412.2 million in support of the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service. This will support capacity, capability and frontline service delivery, and will drive key areas of transformation as outlined in Police Scotland's 3-year business plan and the State's master plan. This continued resource and capital investment will support SFRS in their ambitious strategic service review programme to better align resources to current and future risks and to continue to keep our communities safe.
Thank you. My apologies to Megan Gallagher, who I now call.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. We all read about the Scottish Government's proposals for affordable housing in the paper this morning. However, that being said, it was a key ask of stakeholders. However, we can't ignore that cutting and then reinstating budgets creates instability in the market, as developers simply cannot trust whether this budget will still be in place next year. And I think we've also got to acknowledge the huge amount of damage and lost investment that cutting the budget last year had on our housing sector. Now, if the Cabinet Secretary is serious about listening to housing stakeholders, what will she do to encourage developers and to encourage developments, and what they are calling for to scrap the disastrous rent proposals that will have devastating impacts on our housing sector? And is she confident that the Scottish Government will finally achieve their housing target of 110,000 affordable homes by 2032?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, can I welcome Megan Gallagher's welcome of the investment in affordable housing. It will help to lever in a substantial additional resources, not least from the private sector, and of course the funding that can be raised by registered social landlords to make sure that money goes as far as it possibly can. It will be a mixture of new build but also acquisitions, and bringing empty homes back into use and making sure that we target a lot of that on addressing the issues of temporary accommodation that I mentioned to Mark Griffin in my reply. The only thing I would say to Megan Gallagher, though, is that that investment would be put at serious risk if her leader's letter's contents was to be enacted of £1 billion of tax cuts, because that would be £1 billion less for investment in affordable housing, £1 billion less for our NHS, local government, and that cannot be reconciled with coming here and asking for more money for any aspect of public services in Scotland.
Thank you. I call Patrick Harvie to be followed by George Adam.
The Cabinet Secretary thanked high-income earners for making the fairer contribution that they do. I'm sure she also wants to thank the Greens for designing Scotland's more progressive tax system that's raised that extra £1.7 billion a year. The Greens made the case for it while the SNP were still resisting it. It was also the Greens who led the way on cheaper public transport, especially with the hugely successful bus pass for young people. So will the Scottish Government this year back our current call for a £2 fare cap for all bus passengers to make public transport more affordable for everybody throughout the country?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, look, I mean, the £1.7 billion raised through tax revenues is hugely welcome and is a really important contribution to public services in Scotland. But I think we've asked taxpayers to really go as far as we can in the current climate, given the pressures on resources. And I think, given that we have the resources available to us to make the substantial investments, the tax position I set out in the statement, I think, is a balanced position, recognising the needs of taxpayers with the needs of public services. In response directly to Patrick Harvie's question about buses, we have made substantial investment in the bus network through this budget, and of course we are delivering asylum seeker free bus travel, one of the things that Greens asked for, and a substantial investment in many areas of positive climate action amounting to £4.9 billion. So we'll continue to have these dialogues, but I hope Patrick Harvie will recognise that this is a budget that is good for the climate in terms of the action that we need to take here in Scotland, and I hope that's something that him and his colleagues will welcome.
Thank you. I call George Adam to be followed by Alexander Stewart.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. As the Cabinet Secretary mentioned in her statement, Labour issued a press release where they demanded that this budget provide £25 million more for culture and music venues to get 40% business rates relief. Now that the Cabinet Secretary has announced a game-changing increase of £34 million for culture and delivered 40% relief to grassroots music venues, does she agree with me that the Labour Party will have some serious explaining to do to the artistic community in Paisley Paisley and throughout Scotland if they try and block this funding? And also, does she think the Labour Party will want to follow the example of UK Labour government and cut culture funding?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, can I agree with George Adam that Labour will have some explaining to do if they vote against this budget for a whole variety of reasons that I have set out. But it is curious that Labour have not quite yet got round to asking me about culture funding. I'm sure if time allows, somebody might ask me or even welcome the investment in culture that this government is making through this budget. I'm sure if we wait long enough, we might just hear that.
I call Alexander Stewart to be followed by Colette Stevenson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Cabinet Secretary, local government funding is in dire straits. Local authorities have been warning for years that they are on the brink. In your statement, you say local government funding has increased, yet the figures show the budget is nowhere near what local government need, Cabinet Secretary. So how on earth does this support local government and councils across Scotland to thrive and survive?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, here it is, Alexander Stewart. Here it is, not asking for more
Cabinet
money.
Secretary.
And nowhere in this letter of Russell Finlay's letter does it ask for more money for local government. No. It asks for £1 billion of tax cuts. That will mean.
Thank you, Cabinet Secretary. Just with regards to the use of props, it is one thing to read a letter, Cabinet Secretary.
My apologies, Presiding Officer. In the letter, Russell Finlay asks for £1 billion of tax cuts. He doesn't ask for £1 billion of funding for local government. It's not here. I've read it a number of times. It's not there. So it is a bit rich for Alexander Stewart to come here asking for money for local government when his leader is asking for less money for local government and £1 billion of tax cuts. I think you really need to get your story straight here.
Always through the chair, I call Colette Stevenson to be followed by John Mason.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Scotland's teachers work incredibly hard day in and day out to ensure that our children receive the highest quality of education. Can the Cabinet Secretary advise how the Scottish Budget will support local authorities, including South Lanarkshire Council, to maintain teacher numbers in our schools, as well as offer permanent contracts to the workforce?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, this budget will help local government to deliver on education. As I mentioned earlier on, it provides more money for teachers, more money for additional support needs. It continues the investment in the school estate. And in terms of the investment in teachers, the latest figure I saw for teacher pay showed that a Scottish teacher starting, I think, at the start of their band for a newly qualified teacher was going to earn in the region of £6,132 more after tax than they would the equivalent south of the border. I think that's a good investment in our teaching staff and a good investment in education.
Thank you. I call John Mason to be followed by Stuart McMillan.
Thank you very much. The Cabinet Secretary said that she was restoring the affordable housing budget, but we are in a housing emergency. And does that not mean we should be doing more than restoring? And I see that we're spending £1.1 billion on trunk roads. Does she think the balance is right between the roads and the housing?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, first of all, on the roads budget, it is important that we have a safe roads network, and a lot of that funding is essential spend on maintenance of our road network. But of course we have our commitment to the A9, and we have set out the next stages of the A9 dualling project, and we will continue with that. Now, in terms of the affordable housing budget, I think the affordable housing budget sets the level at a level that will be achievable and deliverable. So it will help the sector scale up in order to deliver on new build, on acquisitions, on empty homes, and to tackle temporary accommodation. It will enable us to do all of that. Where I would agree with John Mason, though, we have spending reviews in the spring for both resource and capital, and what I'm keen to see from the UK Government is a continuation of investment, particularly in the capital space. And once we see what that is, then I'm really more than happy to have a discussion about multi-year funding, particularly in the affordable housing space.
I call Stuart McMillan to be followed by Pauline McNeill.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I welcome the range of measures outlined in the budget proposal and certainly will increase economic growth and send a message that Scotland is very much open for business. Can the Finance Secretary advise how the support and actions outlined in her budget will support businesses in the Inverclyde community?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, of course, the resources for Inverclyde that will go locally will be set out in the circular that I mentioned earlier on. But without a doubt, this investment will help many businesses in the Inverclyde area, and that is something that I'm sure Stuart McMillan will welcome. In fact, it will help businesses across the whole of Scotland. This is a significant investment that will reach all parts of Scotland.
I call Pauline McNeill to be followed by Willie Rennie.
The legal aid crisis seems to have been ignored in this budget, with a 14 million real terms cut in the budget compared to 23-24. What does this signal to those who need a legal aid lawyer in civil and criminal? I ask the Cabinet Secretary, what allocation is there in this budget to address and sustain the legal aid system to attract new lawyers to the profession? I ask this question not simply in the interest of the legal profession, but the system that supports ordinary people who need good quality representation in their lives, whether it's civil or criminal.
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, the budget maintains substantial increases in legal aid fees over recent years to support the vital work of Scotland's legal professionals. The legal aid fund resource budget has been increased to £155 million, an increase of almost 10%. The legal aid fund is demand-led and all eligible costs will be met in year. And I think that might be where Pauline McNeill is looking at. So let me assure her it's a demand-led budget and all eligible costs will be met in year. The legal aid administration budget has been increased to £22.5 million, and this additional funding is to support increased operating costs and non-cash budget cover for an accrued pension liability. Hopefully that's something that Pauline McNeill will welcome.
I call Willie Rennie to be followed by Katie Clark.
Staff in private and voluntary nurseries receive a far lower wage than equivalent workers in council nurseries, even though they do exactly the same job. Now, I supported a former First Minister when he promised to close that funding gap. So why is it not in the budget?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, first of all, let me say to Willie Rennie that I recognise the issue. I also will say, though, that we have invested significantly in early learning and childcare, including for early learning staff. I understand the points raised by the sector, and it is important that they are able to continue to recruit. And that is something I'm more than happy to follow up with Willie Rennie in the next stages of our budget discussions.
I call Katie Clark to be followed by Jamie Green.
North Ayrshire Council have had their budgets cut by £100 million since 2010, with disproportionate cuts to local government over the last 17 years, and are now consulting on cuts to teacher numbers, abolishing all school crossing patrollers, closing libraries and Arran Outdoor Centre. Can the Cabinet Secretary confirm that this budget, which continues with increased ring fencing for councils, will still mean more vital public services will be cut in the coming year? Or can she give assurance that it is sufficient to address the immediate funding pressures and start to undo the damage of the last 17 years?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, can I say to Katie Clark, it provides £1 billion of extra to local government, but only if this budget passes, and therefore I welcome her support for that measure within the budget, and I'm sure she will vote for it. In terms of the ring-fence funding, from recollection, and I'll correct if it's not right, I think there's an extra £500 million plus that is being de-ring-fenced in the local government settlement, something I am sure she will welcome. So the real terms increase in the general revenue grant, the removal of ring fencing, the council tax flexibility, all will help in terms of local government funding of local services, and I am sure that is something that Katie Clark will welcome.
I call Jamie Green to be followed by Fergus Ewing.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. And I hope the Cabinet Secretary will respond to my question in the spirit with which I ask it. Mental health waiting times, particularly for young people, are at shockingly high levels in Scotland. As we all know, our drug and alcohol deaths are at record and alarming rates. When it comes to budget announcements, the devil is very much in the detail. And I note from this budget that the alcohol policy lines and the mental health service budgets attract a very marginal increase next year, which I do not believe are proportionate to the urgency and scale of the problems that we face as a nation. Can I simply ask the Cabinet Secretary if she will give the Chamber some confidence that these societal and serious issues are front and centre of the Government's approach to the budget, and that she will do what she can as she goes through this budget process to make sure that those in society who need help are given it?
Cabinet Secretary.
Oh, can I welcome Jamie Green's tone and constructive tone, and I'm very happy to continue to discuss these matters with him. Can I say, in terms of mental health, there have been increases to mental health spending. Also, in terms of CAMS, he will recognise that this was a real challenge, but there has been substantial progress across the country in terms of CAMS performance, and that's something to be welcomed. I mentioned in my statement further support for teenagers around mental health support, and hopefully that is something that he will welcome. And in terms of alcohol and drugs, I absolutely recognise the importance here. And we're maintaining the record levels of funding for drugs and alcohol. And of course, there will be some funding transfers within the year in terms of the alcohol and drug partnership. So very happy to keep continuing to discuss these matters with Jamie Green as we go forward.
I call Fergus Ewing to be followed by Edward Mountain.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Budgets should not just be about spending ever more or indeed less money, but should surely be about achieving far greater value from every pound spent. Now, 1 in 3 of the acute beds in Highland are currently occupied by people at their end of their life. I see the Cabinet Secretary of Health nodding. And the Highland Hospice reckon that 40% of these could and should be receiving palliative care by other means, normally at home, where people wish to have it. So my question to the Cabinet Secretary is this. Is she, as I am, bothered, bemused and bewildered that NHS Highland is not collaborating far more effectively with bodies like the Highland Hospice, who can provide that and arrange that palliative care in the community far quicker, far cheaper and far better?
Cabinet Secretary, in relation to matters raised in your statement.
Well, can I first of all agree with Fergus Ewing that we do need to make sure that we get maximum value for every pound spent in our public services, and the Minister for Public Finance is on this 24/7. Not just because he believes in it passionately, because it's the right thing to do on behalf of the whole government. So let me give Fergus Ewing that reassurance. The point about where people are cared for is critically important here. Now, I mentioned in my statement the hospital at home, which is really, really important in supporting people at home and avoiding actually hospital admissions, but also in terms of the role of the hospice movement, and I talked about the investment that we're making there is really, really important. I understand from the Health Secretary that he has also asked for more collaboration and for that to be moved forward at pace. And I'm sure the Health Secretary will update Fergus Ewing on that point. But on the point of principle, I totally agree with Fergus Ewing.
Thank you. That concludes the ministerial statement on the Scottish Budget. Oh, my apologies, Mr Mountain. I'm getting ahead of myself. The final question will be Edward Mountain.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Saving the best till last. The EV Infrastructure Fund, announced in 2023 of £30 million, has just seen £6 million spent. Can the Cabinet Secretary confirm that there will be £24 million allocated within the Energy and Efficiency and Decarbonisation line, or has it been cut like the Modal Shift Revenue Support Scheme?
Cabinet Secretary.
I'm really glad that Edward Mountain got in with this question, because it enables me to tell Edward Mountain that we've actually reached our targets on EV charging 2 years early, something I am sure that Edward Mountain will welcome that progress, and I really want to thank him for the opportunity to put that on the record. So I will continue to make sure that all of the elements that are part of our tackling the climate emergency receive the funding that they require, and I set out a substantial package of investment within my statement that will help on all of these fronts.
Thank you, and that concludes the Ministerial Statement on the Scottish Budget 2025 to 2026. The next item of business is consideration of Business Motion 15710 in the name of Jamie Hepburn. I call Tess White for a point of order.
Guidance after Patrick Harvey MSP inappropriately suggested earlier this afternoon that I was dragging Scotland's culture sector into Tory transphobic culture wars. His comment followed a question I raised about Creative Scotland supporting free speech after a member of staff attempted to stop bookshops stocking gender-critical author Jenny Lindsay. I ask under Rule 7.3.1 of the Parliament's Standing Orders whether describing gender-critical views as transphobic is in line with the courteous and respectful manner expected of MSPs in this chamber. It was disrespectful, Presiding Officer. For the women and girls watching proceedings today, they were shameful comments.
Thank you, Ms White. The Deputy Presiding Officers and I will always protect the right of members to scrutinise, to debate and to challenge each other robustly. Challenges to opinions and policy positions are perfectly in order. However, we will not accept members being personally insulting or disrespectful towards one another. We will... Patrick Harvey, point of order.
I'm grateful. Further to that point of order, I would seek some reassurance and clarification that challenging transphobia and transphobic views is not regarded in this chamber as a personal insult to anyone.
Thank Mr Harvey for that point of order. I have ruled on this already, and I would ask members always to ensure that they treat one another with courtesy and respect at all times in this Parliament. We move on to the next item of business, which is consideration of Business Motion 15710 in the name of Jamie Hepburn on behalf of the Parliamentary Bureau setting out a business programme. And I call on the Minister to move the motion.
Move, Presiding Officer.
Thank you, Minister. No member has asked to speak to the motion. And the question is that motion 15710 be agreed. Are we all agreed? We are agreed. The next item of business is consideration of Parliamentary Bureau Motion 15711 on approval of an SSI. And I ask Jamie Hepburn, on behalf of the Parliamentary Bureau, to move the motion.
Move, Presiding Officer.
Thank you, Minister. And now I call on Craig Hoy. Up to 3 minutes, please.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. We will be supporting the motion lodged by Jamie Hepburn. However, we do so with some reluctance, and I want to explain why. While we're not opposing this particular budget set of revisions, we have significant concerns about the practices which are at play here. There are questions that need to be asked about government transparency and about whether Parliament has been able to properly scrutinise the final details of major in-year budget changes. The Scottish Fiscal Commission, Audit Scotland and independent analysts agree that greater transparency is needed around the Scottish Government's budget revisions, because very significant proportions of the original Scottish budget are being transferred in-year between portfolios. And I understand that some in-year revisions were needed because of UK events, such as the election and the timing of the budget. However, the Scottish Government itself still made many changes. And these shifts, mostly from the health and education budgets, are now being propped up by a quick-fix funding boost at the heart of the Government's finances. And this is a problematic practice for two key reasons. It does not allow for sufficient and accurate parliamentary scrutiny of government spending, and it means that in funding our public services, this government appears to be flying by the seat of its pants. Relying on massive in-year transfers mean that the figures presented to Parliament each year in the budget could be construed as being a facade, because they do not represent the actual plans and the actual policy and spending intention by the principal portfolios. This can mislead Parliament and the public regarding the scale and the focus of the government's plans and priorities. For example, a portfolio like health and social care can be promoted as having a big funding uplift, all the while the government has every intention of rerouting that funding elsewhere. In summary, we will be supporting the SSI, but questions remain about transparency, scrutiny and the sustainability of the process by which it is being delivered. And we have to question whether it is acceptable to move such significant proportions of the public's money around using only the vehicle of a statutory instrument. We therefore need to see these questions being put to a wider debate in this Parliament, and I would encourage the Government to engage with that process.
Thank you, and I call on Ivan McKee to respond. Up to 3 minutes, Minister.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer, for the opportunity to speak to this SSI. The Budget Scotland Act 2024 Amendment Regulations, also known as the Autumn Budget Revision, has already been subject to consideration and scrutiny by the Finance and Public Administration Committee, with the committee taking evidence in November and approving this SSI to go before Parliament. The Autumn Budget Revision provides the first opportunity to formally amend the Scottish Budget for 2024-25, allocating almost £1.1 billion of additional funds to support our public services. These changes include providing £1.058 billion to health to support services, fund pay rises and changes to employer pension contributions, £155 million to local government and £35 million to fund police and fire pensions. It also, of course, sets out savings announced by the Cabinet Secretary for Finance and Local Government to Parliament in September, where these impact underlying budgets. This was required to help fund priority areas such as health and support pay rises in order to avoid strike action. The Autumn Budget Revision is routine parliamentary business that proposes amendments to better align the Government's budget with its planned spending profile, and budget revisions require to be in place to ensure that spend can actually be taken forward against the full allocated budget. It's not then the additional funding received during the financial year thus far, most significantly as part of UK main estimates, cannot be taken forward without breaching statutory spending limits. So I think, certainly myself and my colleagues and the whole Chamber, I suppose, are a bit surprised by Craig Hoy's approach on this, attempting rather fruitlessly to make a political point about this process. In terms of transparency, the Government has provided all that the Finance Committee has asked for in that regard. As Craig Hoy full well knows, the budget document we've just heard the Cabinet Secretary talk to has extensive tables in it and in the backup information that provides all that transparency. And if Craig Hoy is struggling to understand that, then we're very happy to come back to FPAC and go back through it with him one more time. But I would urge, as is normal practice, urge Parliament to support this SSI in order to ensure funding received to date is able to be spent on our vital public services. Presiding Officer.
Thank you, Minister. The question on this motion will be put at decision time. The next item of business is consideration of Parliamentary Bureau Motion 15712 on approval of an SSI, and I ask Jamie Hepburn on behalf of the Parliamentary Bureau to move the motion.
Move, Presiding Officer.
Thank you, Minister. The question on this motion will be put at decision time, and there are 2 questions to be put as a result of today's business. The first question is that motion 15711, in the name of Jamie Hepburn, on behalf of the Parliamentary Bureau on approval of an SSI, be agreed. Are we all agreed? Yes. The motion is therefore agreed. And the final question is that motion 15712, in the name of Jamie Hepburn, on behalf of the Parliamentary Bureau on approval of an SSI, be agreed. Are we all agreed? Yes. The motion is therefore agreed. That concludes decision time, and we'll now move on to members' business in the name of Emma Harper.